is a place.
No, no, no. Home is a feeling.
Home is my motherland.
It's more where you feel alive and inspired.
Well, I think we're talking about the same thing, aren't we? Home is where our story begins.
What's your story?
Homesick at Home every Friday from 9 to 10 p.m.
On Radio Van 103.1 with Ina MK
and Rena D.
Shot City. I'm coming home again.
Good evening, dear listeners of Radio Van. This is Homesick at Home, our English-speaking show, and it's Friday again, and we're here in our studio. But tonight we have two guests.
Double the
joy and fun. And good evening, Rena Jan. How are you doing?
I'm great, Ina. How are you? Good evening to our listeners. Good evening to our guests.
Well, did you ask the question and you don't want to hear the answer?
You're right. I did that, didn't I?
Okay. We'll speak after the show.
Okay, so Ina, how are you?
Oh. Better. So pardon my voice. I'm a little bit sick, but I'll try to do my best so you guys don't even notice this thing. Okay, so I would like to remind to our listeners that if you don't have an access to our frequency, you can go ahead and watch our live video broadcast on our official website, which is www.radiovan.fm, and our Facebook page, Radio Van FM 103.1. So now it's the time to present our guests. Peace Corps volunteers, Jully Reynoso and Scott Claggett. Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Are you guys comfortable there on the red couch? Everything cool?
It's a nice couch.
Yeah.
They look comfortable.
So now let's start from the beginning. Where are you guys from? And what in the world do you do in Armenia?
Okay. I'm from Miami in the United States. I was born in Dominican Republic, but I moved to Miami when I was very young, so I grew up in America. And I am here as a Peace Corps volunteer. I currently live in Armenia. I live in Sharon-Savan, so shout out to anybody from Sharon-Savan.
Hello, Sharon-Savan.
And I'm here as a community youth development volunteer.
Okay, so we'll talk about it later. And now your turn, Scott.
All right, so I'm Scott Claggett, and I'm from the state of Maryland in the United States, and I'm living here as well. I live in Vartanadzor, which is close to Megari.
Wow, that's far.
And I'm at Tefel, so I'm on the other side.
I've never heard about Vartanadzor, by the way.
Me too. First time.
Yeah.
Shotpoker, very small.
So how many people live there?
I think about 200 or so.
Oh. So everybody knows you. You're a celebrity there, I bet.
I don't know if they know me yet. I've only been there a little bit, but I stand out sometimes.
Sometimes. So how long have you guys been here?
Well, I've been here over a year.
And you?
And I've been here just 3 months.
Oh, cool. So do you share experiences with each other? I mean, all this, post-departure orientation and things like this. Do you guys do this to help each other?
Yeah, it's interesting because I live in a larger town. I live closer to Yerevan, and I'm in a completely different sector. So right now, just before the show, we were kind of catching up a little bit on it. His experience is still much more different than mine is.
Right.
So, sorry.
And she's been here a lot longer than I have. And actually, when we had training, she was in charge of one of the sessions. So I got to sit and listen to her give me her wisdom.
Miss Julissa.
So most of you are in different areas. And do you? How often do you have a chance to gather all together? Or like most of you gather?
Okay, so this also varies.
Yeah.
And like, for example, it's probably easier for me to see a lot more volunteers, especially when I come to Yerevan. And Sharinsavan, it's only like 30 minutes away from Yerevan, so I could come to Yerevan fairly often.
Julissa is a city girl, you know.
I'm a city girl. I am a city girl. I grew up in Miami, and Miami is a very big city, so I'm actually quite happy that I got kind of a town. Sharinsavan, it's a town, but at least I'm close to Yerevan. But I know that for him, it's so much more different.
Right. And so I don't get up to Yerevan very often, but there's a few of us down in Sunik Mars, and we can see each other because we're all sort of down there together. And
So this mostly happens on the weekends, I guess.
right. On the weekends, I would say. Absolutely.
But now you have to know that you have more friends here.
Yes.
Oh,
Of course.
at least two more.
So, yeah. So you can come here and just let us know and we can hang out together sometime.
I'll take you up on that.
Yeah, sure.
I just wanted to know if you guys had official gatherings all together, or it's just like when you come to Yerevan on weekends, you get to meet each other, or are there special gatherings or meetings that you...
Well, we do have some Peace Corps related gatherings. If we have, for example, we also are very supportive of each other. So, for example, I have a camp that's coming up for boys in Armenia, and a lot of the Peace Corps volunteers are also involved, and they're helping me out with this camp as well. So they, those type of gatherings is where we have, when we communicate, we work with each other. And then we also have like unofficial days. We come, get together, catch up on what's going on their side of Armenia.
Yeah. And occasionally Peace Corps will bring us all together for an
Trainings.
information session or training or a midway through to sort
So
of...
how often is that?
Actually, so for example, they just finished their training because they had a really extensive PST. When you first come in country, it's about 3 months. I mean, I'm going to my mid-service training in 2 weeks. Actually, no, this weekend. We're headed to the mid-service training. So maybe every 6 months or so, there's a training.
So when you say mid-service, so your training is considered to be for 2 years?
Yes. So our service is for 27 months.
Okay.
Yeah, and so we have, throughout those 27 months, we have different trainings.
Right. So we have, when you first arrive, it's 3 months of pre-service training. And then you get given your site or your village, your town, your city, where you'll be working. And you work there for 2 years. And then you can extend for a third year, but the standard is 2 years. And so every 6 months after those initial 3 months, there's usually a training. So I think you have about 3 or 4 trainings during your service.
What would you compare it with? I mean, are you guys like ambassadors?
No.
Or, I don't know, is this like an army? Or
Absolutely not.
How does it
No way. Definitely not. No, but this is really just like we're volunteers. Officially, we're volunteers, and we're here to provide like a volunteer service to Armenia. But honestly, I feel there's so much. It's like a cultural exchange between Armenians and Americans, and that's our biggest biggest takeaway from our 2 years here is the interactions of being with here in Armenia and learning from Armenians and learning about the culture and them learning from us as well.
Right.
I'm a former exchange student, so I hear you guys.
With Flex?
Yeah, Flex.
All right.
There
Wow.
you go. Yeah.
Yeah, we...
Did you get to meet?
Yeah, we've met some.
exchange students?
Absolutely. I forget what I was going to say.
So have you ever volunteered in different countries, or could you actually do that? Or is it just for one particular country and for 27 months and that's it?
I believe that you can volunteer again, but the 27 months is the standard. I think after you finish your time in one country, if you wanted to, I do think that you could volunteer in another country.
Okay.
But I have not done that before. This is my first time as a Peace Corps volunteer.
So why did you choose Armenia?
I chose Armenia mainly because I had been in China for 2 years before this. I was studying there, and I wanted to work internationally, and I wanted to see a different part of the world. And I was looking at my options, and I like history a lot. Armenia has a very long and rich history, and the more I read about it, the more I liked it, and so I applied for it. and I'm lucky enough to be here.
That's great.
We'll hear the continuation of this rich history after the advertisement break. Stay tuned, guys. This is Homesick at Home, and we have two wonderful guests, Julissa and Scott.
Rena, make yourself at home.
But Ina, Yerevan is already my home.
But I mean Radio Van.
You mean a home within a home?
Homesick at Home on Radio Van 103.1. Join us every Friday.
Homesick at home.
Homesick at Home. Yeah, we're back in our studio chatting with our guests. Have a lot of interesting stories to share with us, I bet. So, let's speak about culture shocks. Okay?
All right.
Who's gonna start?
I'll start.
Okay.
With a surprising thing. I feel like I experienced culture shock in Armenia, but not as much as I thought I would, because I realized that I'm Latin American, and Latin American culture is very similar to Armenian culture. So I was able to understand a lot of the cultural differences. That being said, there were still some things that were just like, oh my goodness.
Like what?
What? We want to hear them. Go ahead. Feel free to talk about it.
I think, although I understand, I think the biggest thing for me was just the gender differences that exist here. And I can do it, I can cook and serve and do that, but I honestly admire Armenian women. They are so strong, and so I feel ashamed when I'm next to one, because Armenian women are really, they do a lot.
That's an interesting way of looking at it.
I mean, I feel that maybe Armenians should really think about that more often, how much the woman really holds the household together.
Yeah.
And you can really, maybe because I'm a foreigner and I come in from a different aspect, but that's my first host family. My host mother was just running up and down all day doing all of these things, and I'm like, I'm just so tired just looking at you doing this. So yeah.
What about you, Scott?
I've been thinking, and I'm trying to think of some good stories, and I don't really have any. I mean, I've experienced culture shock, but much like Julie was saying, I've traveled, and I sort of knew what to expect coming in here. I will say that one thing I noticed in particular is, as I traveled back and forth from Sunak Mars, just how kind everyone is to each other. Like as far as hitchhiking, it's common and it's easy, and you see a lot of people.
It's quite safe.
Helping out passerbys, helping people out in the street, and you might not see that as much in America or other parts of the world, depending on where you are. So, like for me, Armenia has like a small sort of everyone knows each other, everyone sort of is helping out each other. It just feels like a very close-knit community and country.
Everybody knows everybody.
and I think that's really cool. I really like that because everyone seems to support each other. And
You
kind of know
cannot
each other.
hide anything here.
So you're talking about actually something positive. What about some negative?
Oh, they're
Some
trying to
negative.
drag.
All right.
Something negative.
Yeah.
Something negative. Well,
I mean, she took the negativity in a positive way. you
yeah,
know?
yeah.
So
I just
wanted
I mean,
to
you guys can speak about these things because the listeners, people need to know about
Yeah.
these
No, I
things.
mean, absolutely. I'm an optimistic person. Let me think.
you're not getting out of this one.
Well, I guess because I do spend a long time traveling back and forth from Megri to Yerevan.
I think taxis are coming.
No, not the taxis. The
drivers.
The roads are a little bit.
The roads.
The
Horrible.
roads are a little bit bumpy. A little bit of It's a different experience.
A little bit. He is optimistic.
And a politician, if I may say so.
Not a politician.
Diplomats. They are ambassadors. Okay, guys. So, can you share a little bit with the listeners who don't know what Peace Corps is? What do they do?
So the Peace Corps was started by John F. Kennedy back in the early 1960s, And essentially, it is, like Julissa was saying, a cultural exchange. And so 2 of our main missions are, we go into countries that have invited us in, the countries that want the Peace Corps volunteer presence. And we come to the country, and it's we bring American culture to Armenia. And then another big important part of that is, after our service, when we go back to America, our job isn't through yet. We're also bringing Armenian culture back to America.
Wow,
And
that's
sharing
cool.
our experiences and sharing what we learned. And all throughout our training, they talk about the importance of, don't forget when you go home to bring some of Armenia back with you and make sure that you share your experiences. Because it's one thing if only we experience our time here.
Yeah.
But if we can go back and forth and be an example of exchange and really share our experiences, then we touch many more people.
That's
So
nice.
how do you actually do that? Sharing your experience.
And
I mean,
have you heard about Armenia through other Peace Corps volunteers? So this is how you heard about Armenia? Back in your
No,
country?
not
No?
really. I
So they
didn't
haven't
really...
been sharing, have they?
Well, honestly, I didn't know anybody who had joined the Peace Corps when I joined the Peace Corps.
Oh.
Not that there isn't anybody from Miami. That it's just I didn't know personally anyone,
Okay.
so I didn't have an opportunity to have the information. But then again, Peace Corps is all over the world, so they won't just be serving in Armenia.
Yeah.
They will be serving in many other countries. But I'm sorry, I forgot your other question.
I said, how would you share your experience after going back?
After going back.
Yes.
Well, I actually have a little tidbit. I went back to Miami like a month ago, and apart from the fact that my host family here just sent a whole bunch of things with me for my family to share, I also was like,
Lavash and things
not
like
lavash. I that's my story. I actually went on a hunt to buy lavash and search for lavash in Miami because I missed it, and I was like, "Where's the lavash?" But they sent brandy, they sent candy, they sent a whole bunch of other things, and I think, especially like I said, Latin American culture is very similar to Armenian culture, so the sharing of the food is such a big thing for
it's a
my
ritual.
family.
Yeah.
So just even sharing, like bringing things, talking about Armenian food, talking about nortari and all the food that is cooked for nortari and how everybody shares it. I think that's a way that we can bring Armenia back to the States.
Right. And another thing that we can do, aside from just a physical gift exchange, is little things such as pictures, but on a larger scale, I know that when I return to America, one thing that I would like to do is go to any some of my former university classes that talk about international relations, or even at the high school level, and just sort of communicate my experience here. Just sort of do a presentation. And just sort of answer
choosing
questions.
a bigger audience
That's
this
nice.
way.
And also, you might, I hope to inspire some people to become Peace Corps volunteers and maybe come to Armenia in the future and just keep the positive exchange going.
So what would you say to inspire someone to come to Armenia to volunteer? How would you introduce Armenia to another volunteer?
5 most inspiring things about Armenia.
Honestly, I think that I would focus so much on the Armenian people. Like every time I have this question asked, like, do you like Armenia? Armenians want to know how much we like it. How much do we love it? Do you really like it? Be honest. And when I say yes, they're like, but why? Why do you like Armenia? And it's like, honestly, the first thing, and it's so true, the people. Armenian people are just so great, so hospitable. You guys take hospitality to another level.
Yeah, it's like a cult or something.
Yes, yes. I am so ashamed. Like, I don't know how.
We need a different word for that.
Yes, you should.
Well,
I don't
okay.
know what it is, but the people. I think Armenia is the people.
That's
Nice.
beautiful.
Armenia is the people. Write that down.
Well, I think there's a lot of truth to that, especially because the Armenian people are sort of all over the world. And I do think that the most important and most inspiring part of people is the people. especially with the resiliency shown to the people throughout history and everything else. It's just a very impressive culture, and they're very, very kind. I felt very, very welcome here. I mean, I stand out. I'm tall, blonde, and blue-eyed. I do not look Armenian, but everyone's very kind to me, even when I'm fumbling my way through a town or a village trying to get to where I'm going with my very bad Armenian. I've never felt at once like I was unwelcome, and so just that's been very impressive. And that is not something that you experience when you travel other places. And so that was very, very...
So this wasn't something you experienced in China?
No, I absolutely experienced it in China as well, but I think Armenia, it's very pronounced. And I think in other countries there was more of a variance. There was very, very kind, and then sometimes there were people who didn't have time for you based on, dependent on where you were. But in Armenia, it's been pretty much 100% supportive no matter the situation. I know I've had marshutnis where like a little boy recognized that I wasn't quite sure my stop was, and like the whole marshutni came together to make sure I got off or I needed to get off. There was just the whole everyone was coming together. Is this your stop? Or everyone knew, and yeah, it's been really, really heartwarming.
And can you recall any like confusing or funny situations you were in, and I mean, this kind of things?
Like culturally
or language-wise?
Yeah,
well, language
anything.
Always.
Oh wow. Yeah, there's a few things. The first thing that comes to mind is when I got when the Peace Corps told me where I would be going, and they said Vartanadzor. When I would tell people, they thought I was saying Vanadzor. And they thought, they're like, oh, you're going to a big city and Lori Mars, like have fun. And I was like, I'm going down south to Sunik Mars. I'm going the opposite direction.
So you taught Armenians where Vartanadzor is.
We didn't know that too.
Okay, guys, our show is called Homesick at Home. And for Julissa, for instance, you've been here for a year already.
Yes.
Maybe it's too soon to talk about this for Scott, or no. But can you tell now where your home is? I mean, after all, after being such a long time out living here, do you miss home? What do you miss the most about home?
Definitely I do miss home. I didn't realize how much I was going to miss home until I came to Armenia. And I went back recently, like I said, and I miss my family, my the food. There's just like Miami has so many different cultures in there. So you have so many different people, different foods, a lot of stuff. So I think I miss that a lot.
The variety?
The variety.
Okay. But you still went hunting for lavash.
But I still I know, isn't it? I really did not think that I was going to go to Miami and be like, where's the lavash here? Where is it? But I did. I did miss the lavash. I don't know.
So you were kind of homesick for it.
Yeah.
So she was homesick at home.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I was homesick, and I wasn't, and I loved it, and I loved to be with my family, and I loved being in Miami. But then I was like, okay, I'll go back to Armenia now, where the lavash is fresh. Yeah.
And what about you,
Scott?
It is a bit too soon for me to really feel the full effects of homesickness. I do miss home to some extent, but at the same time, I kind of am thinking back to my time in China, because I was 2 years in China. And while I missed home, I also once I was away from China, I kind of missed parts of China as well.
Wow.
And I foresee the same thing happening here. I think that we're here for so long, and we get so involved with our host families and the communities that they become a part of home as well. So when we do go back to America, I imagine that we're going, at least I think I will.
So
I'll be missing.
can you define home?
I'm not sure I could. I would consider, I like to think that a little bit of me is wherever I've traveled, wherever I've gone.
That's nice.
Nice, thank you. What was the very first impression of Armenia?
Oh God, let me think.
Da-da-da.
I don't know. Actually, you know what? How I think the first impression that I got was that it wasn't so different. I think sometimes you just for Peace Corps volunteers, you get all this information about Armenian history and Armenian people and all of these things. And when I came to Armenia and I landed here and I saw this, I'm like, you know what? It's not so
It's
different.
not as bad.
No, not as bad, but no, it's not so.
She's putting words into it.
Yeah, she is.
She
but
does
it's
that
not.
a lot.
Thank you. Thanks for the introduction.
Yeah, it's not so different, and I also feel like it's. I see that it's still growing. I feel Armenia is still growing in regards to its people, its diversity. There's more people coming into Armenia, choosing to live here,
Yes.
that are not Armenians, and I think that's a great thing for Armenia. I'm not sure if Armenians feel that way, but
Yeah, we do.
Yes.
The first thing that I remember, and this was pretty recently, so I remember we landed at night. We landed here for the very first time in Yerevan, and then we took a bus to where we were going to have our sort of orientation. And I remember driving through the city, and I was noticing different influences. Like some of the architecture was very Soviet, and some of the architecture was kind of Persian in nature. And some of it looked even just very Armenian, different from Persian or Soviet. And I noticed that when we got to our retreat, which is kind of where we had our training at this in a mountain retreat
in
area.
Asperan.
Yeah,
Oh,
that
wow.
one. And it was a Soviet retreat back in the day. And so I just noticed all these different
Fusions.
fusions, because Armenia has sort of been a melting
Yes.
pot for hundreds of years. And
Yes.
so that was the first time I noticed, like, hey, that's different from this, which is different from this, but it's all the same place.
Interesting.
Yes. Julissa, you were mentioning a camp for boys.
Yeah, so I, along with Youth for Future NGO, which is based in Yerevan, we are, and two other Peace Corps volunteers, we hold a camp that's called To Be, teaching our boys excellence every year. So this year we're having our camp at the beginning of two camps, actually. And we have expanded to include more boys from all over Armenia.
Why boys?
Why only boys?
Excuse me.
I was,
Well, there's also Glow.
There's also Glow, which is a camp for girls.
Ah,
but
okay.
I am going to go to my original point of the gender differences. And I feel like, to a certain extent, women here in Armenia know some of the disadvantages that they have. And I think the ones that need
It's
the most
changing
work.
a lot.
Yeah, it is changing. And I could
Believe
see
me.
that in the conversations that I've had with both men and women here in Armenia. But I feel like focusing on the boys and educating them about different issues about
Nice
them
point.
yes.
is really crucial, because I can educate you women all day long and you already know it, but the boys, the men, they're gonna grow up and they're gonna have wives and they're gonna have daughters. And so focusing on them is very important.
Women
So that's
have
what we try to
already
do.
realized that they are leaders. There are a lot of leaders among them, but guys haven't realized that yet. Some
So
of
how-
I
them.
have seen some really good I do want to point. I have seen some very, really good boys and men here in Armenia. I
younger
just think it's
generation is great.
Yeah, it's
So-
really amazing.
What age are we talking about?
So the camp is for ages 14 to 17. And we talk about a variety of topics, and we do a lot of different. It's a week-long camp, and we do different activities with them. We have different guest speakers come and discuss pertinent issues to Armenia. It's not just general topics, but things that are affecting Armenia in today's.
So you've done this before. It's not
Yes,
the first
so
time.
I did the camp last year as a counselor. I was a counselor, and this year I'm an administrator. So we changed a little bit of the curriculum, and we expanded it because last year it was only one camp and it was only for 40 boys, and this year we're having 72 boys from all over. And we also we're really trying to target the boys in the villages, in the secluded areas in Armenia, not just in Yerevan, not just in the larger cities.
So What kind of reactions do you get from this age group when you try to tell them certain things that can be done or can be thought in a different way?
So I think it's curiosity, and you may get a little bit of a pushback because it's something that maybe for some of them it might be the first time they're hearing this new perspective, and it's okay. It is okay for them to have that.
Can you give us an example of what that might be like?
Oh God. Oh God, I can't think of, my mind just went blank. I really can't.
Because it's interesting, you know.
I mean, they are, the boys are so curious and still. Oh, actually, I'll give you. Oh, but it's not an example of them push. Actually, it's an example of the boys being vulnerable.
Okay.
Last year, we had a debate club, and the topic of the military came up, and we had a debate regarding military, and the boys actually felt so comfortable enough where they opened up about their fathers, their brothers, their family members that are in the military, and they opened up about how they will eventually, you know, and they were vulnerable. They were, meaning that they allowed themselves to cry, and they allowed themselves to share about their experiences, and they were still very patriotic, and that's great, you know. They want to do this thing, and that's part of what we want them to, in this camp, we want them to be free to express themselves. And
Well, now a lot of things are changing. And speaking of all of these things, and speaking of leaders and changes, what do you guys think about these new Armenia that you also have faced, I guess, because you've been here for 3 months, Scott, and Jalissa also, you've been here for a long time. Have you experienced the revolution and all this emotional part of it, or no, you were kind of far from it?
we were kind of far from it because it's like we are not allowed to be involved like in that process. But I did see how Armenians really just stepped up to what they believed in, which I thought was amazing, was great.
Didn't you feel any, I mean, differences and
Before and after.
yeah, before and after?
I don't know.
I mean,
I
not
can't-
politically, but just in general,
The environment?
the
I
environment,
feel
the moods, and the,
maybe, you know, I guess I could say this. I feel like the people that I've spoken to, the Armenians that I've spoken to, perhaps now they feel like not now, but maybe they're starting to feel like they can do something, they can work for something, they can make changes, you know.
I mean,
And maybe something that they did not know or they didn't feel they can do before. Now they feel like.
I mean, this is why you guys are here, because you want that change for Armenia, right?
We want Armenians to be the change they want to be, not what we want them to be. So we're here to guide or to like the culture exchange, educate in English language, work with the youth, all of these things. But if Armenia wants to go a certain route, okay, we'll work with
Yeah,
you.
we're not trying to project anything. We're here to serve Armenian people,
Yeah.
and their interests are in many respects our interests.
Yeah.
I will say that upon arriving here, the political climate, everything was sort of happening. And I was very impressed at just how passionate people were in
The
general.
passion.
I'm not being all politics aside, just the people were very passionate about their country. And that was nice to see, that regardless of what you believed, they cared. And that was inspiring to observe from afar.
Thank you. Scott, can you share a bit, what are the challenging things about teaching English in Armenia?
Yeah, sure. So I've just started sort of down in Vartanazor, and I will say that one thing is there's definitely a language barrier, and that might make sense because I'm teaching English, so maybe that's good, you know. But sometimes there is that issue of I don't understand what they don't understand because there is no middle ground.
Yeah.
And luckily, I have an excellent counterpart who helps me get through that. And so there's lots of little things that are sort of there to help fix those issues. I'll also say that sometimes the students are maybe they don't want to learn English, or instead of learning English, they just want to talk to me as a foreigner and
spend time.
Yeah, and so it's my job to spin those interactions, and so they're learning English even if they don't know they're learning English.
Yeah. So what ages do you work with? I mean,
And so our school is pretty small, and we have all ages. And the students, I think they start learning English in third grade, and we in my school it's just all the way up, and so there's no separation. It's one school for all the kids in the village.
girls and boys.
Girls and boys. Yeah.
Guys, what is volunteering to both of you? What is it? What does it mean?
I'll go back to a variant of what I said before. It is serving the needs of the people. One part of our job that I think resonates very strongly with me is when I go into Vartanazor or I go into a place. It's to listen and to understand what the people there want. Because I'm a volunteer. I'm there for them. And so I listen to what they're saying, what they may want. And then I sort of try to find a way to make that happen that will still accomplish a positive cultural exchange. Because I don't want to just go into there and say, I think y'all need this, and do that. That's not being a volunteer. That's something different. A volunteer is listening, understanding the needs and wants of a community, and then trying to effect those changes that are wanted and needed.
Yeah, I have to agree with that. We're not here to force anything on anyone, so it's important that we work with what our community needs and what they expect of us. So honestly, a lot, one of the first things that Peace Corps tells you, and it's very, very true, is that a crucial part of your service is to integrate into the community. So, and it really is very important to get to know the people. If you need to have 10 coffee dates in one day, go ahead. Have all this coffee, talk, learn who your neighbors are, your community is, everybody. Armenia is such a social culture, and I think that integration is very important in trying to even understand what is it that is needed.
Yes.
What would you guys... Excuse me, Irina. What would you guys change about Armenia? Except bad roads and tortured women.
He didn't say bad. He said bumpy.
I mean, tired.
And he's a positive person. So.
And the views on those bumpy roads are gorgeous. The Megri Pass is beautiful.
Oh God, it is beautiful. Yeah.
It's amazing.
I don't know.
What would I change?
If you were a magician, for instance.
If I were a magician.
God, that's so hard.
Can I ask for the sea, please?
The question was his.
Oh, I
not
know what I
yours.
would change about Armenia, and this is going to be something a little bit more selfish.
Okay, go ahead. Food.
I really wish there was an ocean. I wish Armenia wasn't landlocked. Because
Julissa, I hear you.
I'm an ocean girl. I was born on an island. I lived in Miami. We're surrounded by an ocean, and coming to Armenia, Lake Sevan is beautiful, but it's not an ocean. I think that's what I would change. Just like I wish one of those countries moved aside and beautiful ocean came.
Yeah,
Well.
we hope for that as well.
Scott, she took the easy way out.
Someday.
Your turn.
Y'all been trying to get me to say stuff all night.
Rinja,
All right, let's see.
someday we'll have an ocean.
Someday.
Because we're all are optimistic.
I'd bring Mount Ararat and make it part of Armenia again. if I was a magician.
Wow.
Now, these two guys are the heroes of the day.
Wow.
You get an ocean and a mountain.
There you
What
go.
else do you want?
Nothing else.
Nothing more.
The best of both worlds.
Okay, this was Homesick at Home, and we're done, I think.
I mean, you guys spoke about your impressions about Armenia, about what you think about Armenians. Maybe it might be easier for you to answer this question, but when you leave, what will you take back with you? Something that Armenia gave you.
And only Armenia.
And
Love
only
for lavash.
Lavash. I was gonna say.
apart from lavash, you mean? I'm gonna have to get my lavash shipped from Armenia. I think
We can arrange this.
you can
for
arrange this.
Okay.
I actually talked
Write
to.
down my number.
Okay, those delivery
Express
companies,
delivery.
they can contact Radio Van Homesick at Home right now.
Please. Yes, it's crucial that I get a daily supply of lavash. Honestly, I want to say that how welcoming I think I have learned to be a little bit more welcoming. And I will take that back with me to America. I think being welcoming and accepting, and that, like I said, the hospitality that you guys give to everybody, just trying to make everyone feel at home, you know, that's so important. And I can see how that really builds relationships. I wish that maybe there are some parts in America that it's similar. But I think that it can be even more so. I think that's what I would take back with me.
Do you think it's the same in the city, or it's because you're out in the regions or different towns? And
You mean in
villages?
Yerevan?
Yes.
That's a interesting, because I do have to say, I guess I'm gonna be like the bad person here. I have to say that it's the hospitality is really a home thing for Armenia. Like it's not something you experience in a restaurant. It's in a restaurant, it's just service, but it's more of a home thing. So it's every time I've been invited to someone's home, they've been very welcoming. So that is the difference I can tell you. I think I've only been to someone's home in Yerevan like once or twice, and they've been very welcoming. I'm not sure if it's a regional difference. I don't think it is.
I'll say,
I just wanted to know what
Yeah.
you thought about it.
Yeah.
I'll say as far as my experiences, I think across all of Armenia, everyone's very welcoming.
It's
But
a
down in-
mentality thing.
but-
most of the time.
I believe so, absolutely. I think it's a cultural value that's inherent in all of Armenia. I will say that I think Sunak Mars takes it up a notch.
Of course he wants to
the
say that.
the southern region. I mean, I was told by other people who had been to Sunak Mars how nice and kind the people were. So even other Armenians kind of told me about that, and then I went down there and I was impressed. And all of Armenia is nice, but Sunak Mars takes it up a notch.
I'm gonna have to have Kotak Mars step up their game.
We don't want fights on air. Okay? Well,
That's actually not a fact. She's
especially-
challenging.
Okay, especially if we have a foreigner visiting our house.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna speak for Yerevan now. Okay.
Love.
Here she goes.
I mean, people can even borrow money just to introduce their cultural, I don't know, food or anything, or not to have a table laid. I mean, they won't invite you without anything on their table, and they will try to do it at their best. So you get out of the house impressed and stuffed, of course.
Yeah.
I'm always
Definitely, you have to eat.
I'm always full, and I always have a lot of coffee, and I'm always impressed. So they're accomplishing their goals.
Okay, so talking about food, what's your favorite Armenian dish?
Lavash.
Kirovats.
I'm kidding.
Okay, I think we're gonna title this episode "Lavash."
Kirovats. I'll take Kirovats over lavash every time.
Khoravat?
Over lavash every time.
Well, you need the lavash with
Lavash.
the
You
khoravat.
need the
Khoravat.
lavash goes with everything. I mean, come on.
You're not wrong. You're not wrong.
So khoravat, that's it for you.
Yes, there's a couple things. The apricots are just really delicious. All the fruits, like currants and all sorts of
The
fruits.
fruits here are amazing.
I didn't eat
love
fruit before I came to Armenia.
Tomatoes.
Oh wow.
I was a very picky eater. I hardly ate any fruits and vegetables.
Wow.
And then I've been like texting my friends back home and my family back home, and I'm saying stuff like, "Hey guys, did you all know that I like strawberries? I didn't know I liked strawberries. I really like strawberries."
You had to come to Armenia,
I
Sunik
had
Mars
to.
for
I
that.
know.
Yeah, so the fresh fruit, the fresh nuts, and the hirabas.
That's true. The fruit's
Armenia
amazing.
fruiticizing people.
The apricots are good. What can I say?
Okay, we'll speak more about Armenia and how it changes people's lives after our advertisement break. We have another 10 minutes, 12 minutes
That's
to
it?
go. Yeah, and we're about done.
Time's flying.
This always happens here in the studio. Stay tuned. This is Homesick at Home, and we have two wonderful guests, Scott and Julissa, and they are here with us for another 10 minutes.
Ռեն, խի ուշացար, պրիտոմ չզանգեցիր, պրոպկա էր։
Հայերեն խոսիր հասկնամ։
Ռեն, ինչու ուշացար, ընդ որում չզանգահարեցիր, խցանում էր։
Ինչեր։
Never mind.
Չէ, ասե ինչեր։
This isn't gonna work. Typical repeat.
Oh, here she goes again.
And I'll be doing it every Friday with you on Radio Van. Homesick at Home.
Here we go again. Rena Jan, how are you?
Did you say this isn't gonna work?
But
I just heard you say
we
that.
worked it out.
Okay.
I'm glad. I don't have any complaints.
Okay, on the break, we decided that Scott should try tomatoes
That was discussed.
in
yes.
Armenia.
So Scott and Julissa are invited to our house to one of the weekends. We will decide it together. We won't tell you, so there are no paparazzi,
Of course. Please.
no media. Okay, so you guys need to try, and especially you, Scott.
I
You need to
accept.
try.
I accept. We will
Yeah.
decide, and I will be
I
there.
promise
Challenge
you will like
accepted.
it.
All right, challenge accepted. All right.
Okay, so you guys.
So, what do you do in your spare time? I mean, do you have spare time? Weekends, right?
Yeah, weekends, and we have spare time here and there. I know that I'm studying Armenian still because my Armenian is not at Julissa's level, so I have Armenian class twice a week that I study Armenian. And when I do have free time, I like to try to watch some American sports online because I miss my American sports. Or I do like to read.
What's your favorite sports?
It's hard to say. Probably American football,
Oh.
which I
What?
know
That
is
sounds
totally
disappointing.
foreign
I
here.
never,
But
I never understood why it's called football. Can you
Yeah.
explain
I-
me
I-
right
you know,
now?
what? I don't know either,
Please.
and I'm not going to try to.
And why soccer is soccer? Right?
I don't have an answer for that. It's just how I've always grown up saying it, so it's all I know.
Eternal questions that have no answer.
I will say that I catch myself referring to soccer as football here now, especially with the World Cup going on, and
Yeah,
I like
It's a
to
big
watch
deal,
those games
yeah.
as well. And I'm like,
Do you like
did
it?
y'all see the football game last night? Talking about the World Cup games. So I now I specify football and American football.
Yeah,
Ah, okay.
true. Cultural things.
Cultural exchange, right? There you
Cultural
go.
differences.
Checking it off my checklist.
Yeah.
So you mentioned reading as well. We'll
Yes.
get to Julissa in a bit. What was the last book you read, or your current reading?
The last book I read was called Back to Moscow, and I forget who the author was. It is about a PhD student who was studying in Moscow in the late 90s. And it's just about how Russia was changing during that time period, and it's about his experiences there.
Okay, Julissa, what about your spare time? What do you fill it with?
I like to read as well. I hate to cook, but I am trying to improve my cooking skills.
And you're Latin American?
I know my family hates me.
Come on, say hello to your family
Hi,
right
mommy.
Hey, Mom. Hey, Dad.
now. What?
But
their
I really,
names.
I didn't understand. You hate to cook, but you're trying to improve your
Well,
cooking.
yes, I'm trying to improve.
She's trying to improve her
I'm
hating.
trying to improve my cook. I feel like I should if I want to survive.
We did it again.
Yeah. So, and then like every time, because of course, as any good Armenian woman, you're supposed to learn how to cook.
Oh my goodness!
But the first
Jully
questions
said,
that
don't
they ask,
torture yourself.
No, I know I'm not. I every time they ask me, you want to marry an Armenian man? I'm like, oh, I will make a
I'm not
bad
sure.
Armenian wife.
I
I don't know how
cooking.
to cook, yeah, so I can't do it.
I will say this.
Well,
Going back.
it's easy. Improvise. Sorry.
Oh, improvise.
Just improvise.
Follow the
The
passion.
other
That's what
day,
Ina's bags, right?
I said this to a tatik that was trying to marry me off, and I told her I can't.
Typical.
I'm bad Armenian. I'm bad Armenian girl. I don't know how to cook, and she's like, I will cook for you.
I will be your personal chief.
I was like, no.
Is she trying to go back
Let me
to
tell
America
you a
with
secret.
you?
Let me give you a secret. I'll tell you a secret. I'm Armenian and I hate to cook too.
Oh, wow.
Blasphemy.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen,
I'm a
this happened
different
on
kind
air.
of Armenian.
Get out of this studio. She's a guest. She can stay, but you...
And there's your Armenian hospitality. The guests can stay.
Oh God, they're doing it.
Okay.
Yeah, it's interesting, but yeah, I'm improving.
Scott
my
was trying to say something.
Yeah, going back to the food really quick. I don't know what fruit this is, but I just call it tatui sok, just sour juice. There is a juice that my host family makes down in Vartanazor that's just very sour and it's delicious. I have no idea what fruit it is, but it's really good.
Sour.
I just call it tatui sok. I think it's like shalak or something in Armenian. Shalak. I'm not sure.
Have you asked them what?
I've asked.
Shlor. Shlor?
Yes, I think so.
Okay, it's plum.
It's plum.
Yeah, it's very sour.
sour
It's
plum.
sour plum.
Yeah, it's delicious.
Yeah.
I love that juice. I'm gonna miss that as much as I'll miss the everything else.
Wow. Okay, we'll send you some sour juice and lavash.
Yes,
Okay.
please.
And tomatoes with eggs.
Well,
And a cooking book.
Yes. I know.
You can
Or
only
an
send the
Armenian
tomatoes
man,
with
you
eggs
know,
if
to
I
make
like
her
it.
cook.
And the tatik to cook for you.
All right.
I mean, this is the first time I've had somebody offer to cook for me. So a tatik offered to cook for me.
That's a hard offer to refuse.
This only happens in Armenia.
Okay, guys, we have 2 minutes, and you can ask a really quick question to us.
1 minute each.
All right.
In 1 minute each.
I have a
If
question.
you guys have one.
Okay, I have a question. How has it been interacting? So the show has been on for a while.
Yeah.
So you've talked to a
3
lot
years.
of foreigners.
Yes.
How do you feel like has your anything changed in the time that in the 3 years that you've
You
been
mean
doing
the
this?
impact that a show
Yeah,
has?
for you personally, the
For
impact
us?
of talking to
I mean,
foreigners.
for me, I would say it might be a bit different than for Ina because I also have been here for 4.5 years. So most of the experiences and the things that I hear, I also can relate to, you know, because I've felt some of those too. But
And of course, I have experienced these kind of things back in the U.S. So I know what a cultural differences are. I know what it feels like to be to feel like home and to miss home, because now I miss a lot of things that I experienced in America. Most of them are really good friends I met and with who I'm still in touch with, by the way.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yes, and of course, the show, the goal of our show is to spread this kind of information for English speakers, to make them feel like home more than they can do here in Yerevan. And of course, not only in Armenia we have audience, also worldwide, because we have an application which can be downloaded in smartphones, also online video broadcast we have, and the Facebook page. And so the show lives on, and the network it's spreading, and we're getting a bigger audience.
yes.
And we hope that the positive influence will grow
Very cool.
with each show.
Yeah, what you're doing is awesome. Yeah.
Thank you.
Good job.
I'll ask quickly, what would you all change about Armenia if you were a magician?
Ah, that's a good one.
I don't need to be a magician, but I,
Right now, what I've changed is the time, because we need to leave. Unfortunately, we're out of time, but we'll tell you this after the show.
Sounds good.
when we're having breakfast,
Yeah.
no, she's
no,
cooking for us.
just now, off air. This was Homesick at Home, and we have two cool
Thank
guests,
you.
Scott and Julissa. They shared their experience with us. Thank you so much. We enjoyed you guys being here
It was
in
a
our studio,
pleasure.
and we will continue our interaction after this show. And thanks to everyone. Have a great Friday night and an amazing weekend. Bye bye.
Enjoy it.
Thank you for having us.
Bye.
Thank you to our
for having
families.
us.